This talk today is to basically show where we've come in terms of benthic habitat mapping and what the information we've been able to derive from the maps and then further studies beyond those initial maps. So first off, just a brief intro to the mapping that we've done here locally. Probably can't start that from here. Just click on that picture. So we've conducted a benthic habitat mapping effort over the past, back in the mid-2000s to the late 2000s. And these are the results of that effort. This is flying from Biscayne north through Martin County. And you can see the seafloor topography, and then the colors represent different habitat types along the shore. And what we've learned from this right off the bat, just initial habitat mapping effort, is that there is a diverse number of habitat classes throughout the region. You can see the list here is pretty long. That there are large amounts of reef, hard bottom, and seagrass off of our shores. And the amounts of those are inconsistent within and between the counties along shore. And these maps are also much more reliable than previous efforts. So as you can see, as we go up the coast here, the colors change, which indicates change in the environment. I shouldn't leave out Martin County, but all the way up to Martin County, a much different environment. So earlier, before this mapping effort, I don't want it to appear as if nothing had ever been done, but there was an effort done in the early 90s by the Army Corps of Engineers, and they mapped, using acoustics, I believe, they mapped areas of low relief and high relief habitats and sediment, basically a geomorphology type map, and they were that was what we had at the time. I attempted to use a similar figure here to show a comparison between the maps we have now and those previous maps, and you can see that they're really different. And just a quote from one of the reports early on, the early mapping efforts showed the previous resource maps are skewed an unknown amount, and they cannot, or they should not be considered reliable. So this is what spurred on the mapping efforts, and now we can all take it for granted that we have very accurate a picture of the seafloor, above 80% in most estimates, and we get better extent estimates. So now we have better understanding of exactly how much of the different reef types there are and where they're located. So with that information, we can then build upon it and do a wide variety of things. And so I'm going to go through and show you kind of what I've been able to do with these maps over the past few years. So an obvious first choice is to look at historical impacts on the seafloor. And we're able to do this if we look at dredging channels and areas where reefs may have been buried in the past. This is an image from 1870 of the shoreline here, just for perspective. This is Lake Mabel, where Port Everglades was built from, and they shut the channel right through here. So this is kind of showing the same area. And we don't have any information from the offshore, but we know that there have been drastic changes in the region due to shipping and port development. You can see here the initial channel built in the late 20s. And we can see from historical nautical charts, this was from a chart from 27 and a chart from 29. We see drastic changes in the coastline associated with these port developments. So we can try to measure that with the habitat maps. And in this case, if we use the bathymetry, we're able to understand the extents of the inlet channels, but also we're able to identify areas of reef that had been buried by I don't know how to say this, inappropriate dumping of material from the original construction. So the original construction, they blast material here, they take it offshore and they dump it. And a lot of times they dumped it too early. And so we can see areas of the reef that have been buried by this. And you can see here a mosaic showing all the rubble and boulder material that's on top of these reefs. So now with the habitat maps, we can actually measure the amount of area that's been affected by that. We can quantify that area and then take action to try and restore that if that's desired by the management community. Another early effort with the habitat maps was looking at the anchorage designs. In Southeast Florida, there's 3 main ports, and each one of these ports has a large ship anchorage associated with it. And off of Port Everglades, which is here, the old design, which is this hatched light blue line, was creating an issue where ships were getting too close to reef habitats, and there were actually 10 major groundings over 10 years, which caused a lot of damage, as you can see here in these photos, crushed corals and rubble generation, all this stuff. So a lot of these, there was an effort to evaluate anchorage and then move it to a better design, and the habitat maps were directly applied to do that. And you can see here the yellow line is the new anchorage design, which we have not had any major incidents since that was put in place in 2007. So a direct application to saving coral reefs, which is great. In the Port of Miami, there was also an issue with the anchorage design. About 28% of the anchorage contained reef habitats, which amounted to about 700 acres, these dark and orange, purplish kind of polygons in there. All of that reef was located in the shallowest part of the anchorage, which was the heaviest used. We can see here the heaviest used portion. These dots represent ships. And so this was an obvious problem to go ahead and try and come up with a design to correct for this using the habitat maps. And this spurred on a study where we actually conducted in situ surveys to look at the effects of the benthos from the anchoring. And we were able to measure acute and chronic effects on the reefs. Differences between sites inside the anchorage and outside the anchorage, including increased rubble on the outer reef system in this yellow area. And hard coral density and number of species were drastically reduced inside the anchorage versus outside the anchorage. So we know here that both acute effects, where you drop an anchor, it hits something, that's an acute effect, and chronic effects, which are long-term of, say, 60 or 70 years of ship anchoring in the region, both affected these reefs dramatically. So using the Benthic classifications, we can go in and create a new design with all the stakeholders' input to satisfy stakeholders and ship usage and dramatically reduce anchoring impacts to the coral reefs. And hopefully, through time, these reef communities will be able to recover. This is the new design. It's not in place yet, but they're working very hard to get it done in the next couple of months. So if we can quantify all of these shipping efforts, all of these impacts from shipping and port development from the past, to understand how historical populations have been affected, or say how the grand total of what's been affected by these activities. And if we weight them according to their severity based on anchoring impacts, groundings, and of course reef burials and dredging, we get that total area, and we apply a density of today's value of coral density, which we'd say is 2.6 per square meter, or an average cover of, say, 3% cover. The previous impacts amount to about 8 million corals, 8.1 million corals being affected by these activities. And put that another way, about 11 hectares of live coral tissue area. So these have had a huge impact on the system. although percentage-wise it may not seem like a lot because it's a large system, these numbers do show that there has been massive impacts. And this is all possible just by having the habitat mapping data and doing some more work with it. So it can not only get us about impacts, but it can also help us with understanding human use in the area. The benthic habitat maps have been used to in a spatial human use study where we sent out requests for people to go online and tell us where they do what activities on the reef and how much within the past year. And we're able to quantify all that in association with the habitat maps. And then we can build a picture of not only human use in the area, but how, human use as it relates to the different habitat types. And so this particular study showed most of the usage in our area is happening on the nearshore habitats, very close to shore. A lot of it's focused around inlets and piers. And it also picked up a pattern which was quite interesting. The Broward-Miami region had a widespread impact, but they have a lot of reef area, whereas areas up in Martin County had intense use, but the use was much more spatially localized because there isn't as much habitat available. So definite different patterns of distribution of human use throughout the coast. Quite interesting. Another study that we did using the benthic habitat maps is to look at queen conch. The queen conch distribution around the Port Everglades. We knew there was a kind of accumulation of conch down here, so we want to understand the general distributions and what's going on with that population. We used the habitat maps to design a study to go out and collect 72 benthic survey sites where we looked at the number of conch and the size and measured them and all that, and then the percent cover of habitat. And we were able to pick up a clear association preference of conch and habitat type. So very interesting in management applications. If you're interested in managing conch, you know what habitats to target. And then another result from this study was that in conch, there's no real visual way to measure age of a conch. They get to a certain size, and then it's just all about thickness of the shell. And so that thickness to age relationship varies depending on where you are and the conditions and a lot of different factors. So we basically used a 15 millimeter lip thickness for our study to classify adults versus juveniles. But it turns out that the data that we collected, we're able to show that 12 millimeter lip thickness was a more appropriate age of maturity. So that can help inform management of this as well, because then you can target the conch population that's, say, adult sexual maturity for different reasons. And then I want to touch on quite a few things we've done in terms of looking at the changes along our coastline. We know that we go from a subtropical region in the south to a temperate region in the north to transition zone, and we've seen those changes in the habitat map. So we've used the habitat maps to investigate these biogeographic differences along the coast. And in particular, the first study that was done, we just took transects, like 200 or so transects, shore perpendicular transects along the coast, and measured the amount and the type of habitat along those transects, throw them in an MDS to understand the similarity between them, and generate clusters through a dendrogram, and then feed those clusters back into the original lines and color code them according to the statistical cluster, and you see distinct spatial patterns along the coastline. So then now you have a statistical justification of where you call certain areas, what areas are different from other areas based on the habitat morphology. And so in this case, we have 6 coral reef ecosystem regions, one in Biscayne, which is defined by seagrass, one through Broward through Miami, one in Deerfield, one in South Palm Beach, North Palm Beach, and Martin County. You can see just by the colors and the variation in size that these areas are distinct. So then we've tested this looking at benthos and fishes. The benthic populations, we did a study where we had 70 benthic sites and 5 different corridors and split them up by habitat types. And we find that there are differences in, say, mean stony coral species richness between habitat types. Colonized pavements statistically lower than the ridge, statistically lower than the inner reef. So you would find more species as you go further offshore. And also with the Gorgonia densities. In this case, these are split up by morphotype, rod, and plume. And you can see that there's statistical differences between habitats as they go along. And then there's also differences within latitude. So we did these corridors from off Key Biscayne and periodically throughout all the way up through Hillsborough. And we find differences within categories, say, within the colonized pavement from south to north. So we see that in the south there's lower richness on the colonized pavement, and then it gets higher in the middle, kind of off Fort Lauderdale area, and then drops back down off towards Hillsborough. And so we find these different latitudinal patterns within the area as well. Looking at reef fish assemblages, I'm not doing justice to all the work that's been done on the reef fish in the region. There's been a 5-year visual census study that's collected thousands of data points on reef fish, and the data set's immense and has a lot to offer. I'm just going to talk briefly just about it in the context of biogeography. And so with the reef fish assemblages, we can take the fish data, associate it to the habitat types and the regions that have been defined, and then get an understanding of how the assemblages are distributed along the shore. In this case, we find that there's distinct areas that in the southern regions, which are these blue lines. These are the tropical species, and these would be more temperate species. More tropical species percent occurrence drops dramatically as you go north into those northern regions. So you don't see as many bicolor damsels in the north as you do in the south. And so this occurs for many tropical fish, whereas the temperate fish increase in percent occurrence. So you start to see a lot more of the species that are more tolerable of colder temperatures. And we see that from a shallow water assemblage and from a deep water assemblage. So very interesting, but what's more interesting is with this information, we can define regions and habitat types as different strata for reef fish assemblage, for different reef fish assemblages. And then we can feed that data back into the map to actually understand the distribution of these reef fish assemblages. So we've done that here. This is a bootstrap means plot, an MDS plot, basically of the different habitat types, the different fish assemblage, the fish assemblage regions, we call them, which are basically, we split the data by reef versus hard bottom, high versus low rugosity, and these biogeographic regions. And we come up with very distinct assemblages, which we can feed back into the maps to get a clear picture of how these fish assemblages are laid out in space. So very informative. And all of this has led us to a better understanding of the broader aspect of what's controlling the biology along shore, which is essentially the geology and the currents and the cold water temperatures. So we have a Bahamas fracture zone indicated right here. We get the Florida current that comes up along our shore. And so our reefs are right in the middle of this transition. And between both the benthic and the fish communities, This area right here, the Bahamas Fracture Zone, is a major difference between the two, where we see much more temperate tolerant species up here and much more tropical, subtropical species below that line. And that has to do with the way the Gulf Stream goes offshore and creates these meanders, which drives strong upflow of cold water. So all very informative, all derived from our habitat mapping and the subsequent studies. Now, with nearshore habitat mapping, off Palm Beach County, we've been able to utilize a data set that has defined the nearshore habitat, exposed nearshore habitat over and over again over the last 10 years or so. And we can analyze those differences and come up with percentages of the area of reef that have been exposed more through time than others which may have been only exposed a little bit and then buried by sediment. And if we look at that frequency of exposure, we find direct relationships to the benthic organisms that live there. So it's a direct relationship where we're able to show the succession of these habitat, these nearshore habitat communities are being driven by both water depth and the frequency of burial or the persistence of exposure. So they're also very interesting in understanding those nearshore environments, those dynamic nearshore environments. So moving on to another study that we've done, and this is going to be kind of a longer section that's compartmentalized into different parts. In 2014, we did a nearshore mapping study that went from Biscayne, essentially Key Biscayne, through north to Hillsborough Inlet. We took aerial photography at 1 foot resolution, and the purpose was to increase the mapping resolution on the nearshore habitats, which have probably the most ability to change through time, and then also with that collect quantitative information and investigate latitudinal differences, which I already talked about. But as part of this, we came up with some very interesting discoveries. It's very recent, within the past few years. So you can see here through the imagery that we have this light-colored area and then these dark speckles. If we, well, lo and behold, it turns out that we found a bunch of Acropora cervicornis patches throughout the region. Now, we knew some of those existed. There were 7 of them that had been identified and persisting for over the last 20 years. But this study identified 28 new ones, so considerably more than were previously known. And then finally, in 2016, we were able to secure funding to actually go out and measure the condition and their extent. So this is very new. The data analysis are still in progress. But basically, these are the results from the coral patch perimeter mapping, which I know none of you can probably see these faint yellow lines, but trust me, there are little yellow polygons around all these red dots. The red dots are targeted as the areas of the densest part of the cervicornis. And then we went out to each one of those dense areas and snorkeled around them with scooters and collected GPS points to mark their boundaries. And in some cases, this was an eye-opening experience because we wound up encircling massive parts of the reef that we weren't expecting. We were expecting these to be much more localized. So we wound up mapping 23 areas around 35 patches, 35 of those dense spots. And a lot of that is because they span between dense spots. But the total mapped area that turned out to be 826,000 square meters, or about a third of a square mile of just dense cervicornis. So quite an eye-opening study in terms of understanding the spatial extent of cervicornis in our region. We don't know how that's changed through time, so we're also looking into that. As I mentioned, at each one of those dense patches, we went out and did surveys, so we collected information information on the percent cover, live, dead, and rubble, and diseased, and all this stuff. And we wound up, we were able to throw those data into a multivariate analysis and come up with an understanding of the patch condition. And so basically there turns out to be 3 patch condition types. There's this type over here, which is really high. We rated that high, which is very good. There's a moderate condition, these ones in the middle. And then there's a very poor condition, these ones on this end. And these lines represent kind of the different effects of what's driving these sites to be over here versus these sites to be over here. And it turns out that these sites are, they have more rubble, and these sites are more dead. But in general, we get these three main splits. That's interesting. What's kind of sad about this is we only have 2 green ones. That's about 5% of the sites, and so a lot of our sites were in the not as desirable categories. And then we can compare these and see, okay, so what makes the high sites high? Well, the 62% live cover versus 13% standing dead, 4% rubble. Whereas the poor, there's about 10% live, about 26%, and then standing dead, and about 20% rubble. So we can see clear differences in these groupings based on their condition. Can I get you to? Oh, that's I got it. So here's an example of the 5 polar opposite sites, right? So we have one of the green sites, site 8, just unbelievable cover. It's very large, expanding, just seemingly endless with very little dead. And then we have sites like this, which unfortunately there were more of these sites than these sites. So sites that used to be like this, but are now in a different state, mostly standing dead. So not exactly encouraging, but does show the need for intervention in terms of understanding what's going on, monitoring these sites to understand what's causing these changes, the degradation. But not all the dead sites are dead. Not all the sites that had not a lot of serpentines left, live serpentines left are dead. And in particular, this site we found, does this work? This site we found among all the dead cropper rubble, an extraordinary amount of live parietes. So all of this in here is live parietes growing on top of that old dead serpentine rubble. And it's quite an impressive site. So we're also not sure what caused this dynamic. When you have a site that's seemingly been really hit by something, and all the serpentines is wiped out, but then we have just a massive field of parietes, seemingly quite healthy. So very, very interesting. This is all very new. And I guess my point here is that there's still discoveries to be made out there. We've been studying this area a long time. So another aspect of the nearshore mapping, since we took 1-foot resolution photography, we were able to identify individual corals within the area based on just spectral signatures. Here is an example of a coral in the bathymetry, and then you can see these little black specks in the imagery. They actually all turn out to be large coral. So we went and visited those specks, and this is what we found. We decided to make a cutoff at 2 meters diameter as kind of our cutoff for what we consider a large coral. But these are all the oldest members of the population. They've been here hundreds of years. Probably some of the oldest living organisms in South Florida. So very eye-opening. We knew about 2 of those, 3 of those before this study. So we went out and surveyed all of those corals. Turns out we found 185 of these large corals, greater than 2 meters. 115 of them were alive and 70 were dead. They're predominantly Orbicella fabulata. The max size was about 5.6 meters, planar diameter, that's a straight diameter. But if you measure the surface area of the coral, it comes out to about 7.45 meters as the largest coral. So significant in a lot of ways. The health of these corals was also kind of tabulated. We typically took images at each side above, and then we measured the coral, and we estimated the percent cover of live tissue and the disease and all that stuff. And it turns out that, unfortunately, 34% of them were completely dead right off the bat. And then a large percentage of them had very little tissue left on them. There was only a very small group of corals that had less than 10% mortality. So healthy corals. And I'm sure this number has now shrunk, but we don't know because we're not monitoring these corals and after. With this disease event going on, we've seen the death of at least one of these 5% corals, where it went from about 90% alive to completely dead in about 3 months, and lost about 32 square meters of live tissue. So not a good sign, but this pie chart may be changing as we speak. But it does show that from our data, there were 50% of these corals, this was in 2014, when the disease event was ongoing and bleaching had been happening. These corals, some of them had been bleached. 50% of them did not have any sign of disease or bleaching. So there's something with these corals that needs to be investigated. But that means the other 50% did, right? And so we had about 8% of the corals which had both disease and bleaching. About 23% with just disease and about 23% with just bleaching. So not a great picture overall in terms of their condition, but what would be really interesting is to understand the trajectory of their condition. Is it getting worse through time? And we can do that if we monitor these for, say, percent mortality through time. And then we can understand how they're being affected by bleaching and disease and all those things. So, of course, everyone knows about the bleaching story. I don't need to go into more detail on that. But one more study that we did using the habitat maps was and the FRP data, is to look at hotspot clustering along the reef track for disease and bleaching, and tabulate areas that have a high frequency of that through time. So areas that have a high frequency of hotspots each year, and then we can identify areas that are problematic, and then we need to go in. Once these areas are identified, we need to go in, do some studies to understand what's causing those areas to be a persistent hotspot for disease or bleaching. And we've identified those areas here. So another very applicable management information. So in summary, I just want to say that I hope it's obvious by now that habitat maps are valuable to understanding and managing the seascape. Kind of obvious. But the mapping has led to efficiently designed studies that have elucidated organism inventories and distributions that may not have been possible otherwise. Most of the projects have had a direct management application, from the reduction of direct reef impacts, the anchorage stuff, to marine spatial planning for the future. So I implore that we keep working on collecting these data to inform management decisions. New discoveries have been made with each effort, each new effort, and there's a lot more to be done. And I just say, I put this list up here not so much for everyone to read all this, but just to have a completeness within the PowerPoint when it gets shared with folks. But basically, we have current projects and future projects designed to try and answer more questions like, what's the, I think Daniel Gooding's going to do a good job of talking about the hotspot clustering that I just mentioned. Also, what's the influence of mangrove, the amount of mangrove and seagrass and human population on fish species along the reef tract? Looking at temporal changes in the cervicornis patches. We got archived imagery. We're going back and looking to see if we can identify are these things getting bigger through time, or is it just variable or what? So those types of things, still much to be done. And I'd just like to thank all my funders and partners and graduate students, especially the folks here that have unknowingly have contributed to this presentation. So thank you. Got it all? Great.
I'll say something a little bit. Not a question, just a statement, and probably stating the obvious. Brian's talking a lot about the scientific applications and projects and learn from all this and management, but I literally use these maps every day in reef injury prevention and response. I don't know if you guys know, but we watch our large vessel traffic on AIS websites every day, and I plot them on these maps to get an idea of if there's any reef injuries being caused by anchoring or other events. It's just immensely valuable.
Yeah.
You mentioned the large corals that you found, and that you noticed when you took the data in 2014 that there wasn't a lot of disease and bleaching. And at least from the projects we've been doing throughout, the year 2014, 2016, we really saw the disease start to pick up in late 2015 and 16. Do you have any plans to revisit those really large corals, maybe learn something to see? I know there are probably a lot of the disease we've been seeing isn't necessarily probably a lot of, but do you have any plans to revisit those and get an idea of what's happening to really, really large corals? If we've lost corals that are hundreds of years old.
Right, yeah, we've put in an OSCRCP proposal to try to do that, but they're very competitive, so it's, at this point we don't have any money to go repeat that study, but there is, it would be wise to go repeat that study because we could get an understanding of how those corals have changed in the past 2 years and identify which corals haven't been affected as much as others, potentially save genetic diversity of these resilient corals that have been there for hundreds of years, perhaps take disease mitigation action like removing the disease part of the tissue to try and save the rest of the colony. That one colony that we saw, but that is really the most famous colony known, is one that was cored by Big Dodge back in the late 2000s. They identified as 320 years old. It had split in 3 parts, but it was 90% live tissue and just completely died in 3 months. The disease just went through quickly. There were a lot of other corals that looked like they had recently had the disease, but were managing and the disease seemed to have been involved with. So there's positive and negative, but we just found out about these corals and trying to get the wheels in motion to actually start investigating these unique organisms to find out why they're there, why they're so special, and how we can keep them around. Obviously, larger corals have a higher reproductive output, higher fecundity, but we don't know if these corals are so old they're senescent. So looking at their reproduction would be pretty key to you know, understanding if they're even worth putting effort into, because if they're senescent, they're not contributing to the local species recruitment. And, you know,
Do you think if you were to take a small fragment of that, that it would regain its reproductive capabilities possibly, if it is truly a resilient coral?
well, yeah, I mean,
is that?
we don't know why it would be senescent. You know, it might be just age, or I don't know. I haven't looked into the research on that whatsoever. So there's a lot that can be informed by this.
Yeah. I'd say sooner the better, since it looks like 2016
I say so too,
is
but you
going to be
know, funding cycles are